Watch the Atheist Experience live Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/ytaxp and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callaxp.
It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show with the dirtiest search history. I'm Christy Powell. My co-host tonight is the SecX patron saint of sex work. Welcome, Arden Hart.
Hey.
I always almost stumble, Arden. You're playing with names. You're keeping me on my toes.
I'm sorry.
Thanks so much for being back.
Yes, of course. I love being here. You know that.
Well, we are joined again tonight by sex work royalty and our favorite known pornographer. Welcome back, Sinn Sage.
Yay, so happy to be here again.
So tonight we are sexualizing and secularizing trans women in porn. So if you want to call in with your questions and stories, we'd love to hear it. You can call us at 512-991-9242 or tiny.cc/call-sex. So while I'm not right now, you better call in because the show is coming.
All right. Well, that sound means we are starting this week the way we do every week with what's turning us on this week. Arden, thanks so much for being here. What's got you turned on right now?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't give an honorable mention to the glass dildo that I got last week. But I think more importantly, we had a whole month of guest hosts on Transatlantic this whole last month. And we had some really incredible, amazing trans voices at sharing their perspective on trans rights. And I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you guys that I think you should all go check it out. I'm so proud of the work that we've done there. But, it is what it is. Love it. And yeah.
Yeah, well, good on you for creating the type of environment, where this is what your black book looks like. Congratulations there.
Trying.
And Sinn, super excited to have you here again. What's got you turned on right now?
So just last night, I finished the last episode of season 3 of this show on Netflix that everyone needs to watch, and it is called Sex-Education.
Mm-hmm.
And that title is very interesting because it seems like it relates in one way, and then as the show progresses, it takes on almost a different kind of meaning. It's kind of like a fictionalized version of reality. Some stuff is a little bit like extra. You'd be like, okay, this would never happen in real life. But with that said, it's a really good like mirror or lens to view sort of like how we teach people about sex, how we talk to teenagers about sex. And it highlights, gender issues, sexuality issues, all of these things in a way to hopefully like show how we could be doing things better. And it's a British show, so you love the sexy accents. And then also me, I'm a huge X-Files nerd, and Gillian Anderson has a role in the show, and she's just brilliant. She's so amazing to watch act. Like, she's so fucking good. And so yes, definitely turning me on. I love it, and everybody needs to watch it.
Yeah, we talked a little bit on the show last week about the non-binary representation in that show. And in particular, the way they sort of highlight the, the cis washing that can often happen in relationships. I really recommend people take a look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot to talk about tonight, so we're going to get right into it. I'm going to start in a way I usually try to avoid, but let's do it anyway. And that's just with a short quote. Esther Perel likes to talk about how separateness is a precondition for connection. She goes on to discuss that there's a need for distance between ourselves and the the people that we want to have sex with, that there's something of a need to create a little bit of like mental separation and even objectify our sexual partners. Now, I'm really oversimplifying her writing. I would definitely encourage people to take a look at some of her work. But I
Yes.
wanted to hear from the two of y'all how that idea really landed with you, if that felt uncomfortable, or if that idea of being willing to objectify somebody that you are making love with or, aggressively fucking, if that was problematic at all.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about that. So for me, I think, it's interesting because there's also something Dan Savage sort of says the same stuff whenever I listen to his show, where it's like, we don't want to be objectifying like women or like an entire gender of people or something like that. And then like discounting that they are also people. But I think that like we do want to find some kind of a balance, because when you are with a person, I know sometimes I do want to be seen as an object, or I want to be used as an object, because that makes me feel like attractive or sexualized. Like I am being sexualized. I'm being desired in this objectifying way. And I think so sometimes there is something like that will add to the experience. I think if we can like see our partner just as a sexual object for this time, then we can have like a different kind of sex. And I think also it falls into that sort of like Madonna whore aspect, where if you you've known someone, you've been intimate with your partner for decades or whatever, then you only want to treat them so gently and softly. But it's like, hey, maybe that person like wants to be objectified. And so I think we need to like make space for that sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I know that like when I was kind of coming into understanding my sexuality more deeply, I think I struggled that like some of the things that I wanted and that I liked and that I was into, I was like, oh no, am I contributing to some sort of like broader like misogynistic like trends by saying like I want to be objectified or like I want to be treated like that? I was really worried that like it was wrong in some capacity. And I think kind of reaching that stage of sexual liberation where I can let myself be an object and where I can objectify my partner in that sort of like romantic, like I'm putting you on this sort of pedestal for like achieving my own like sexual satisfaction. It is, I think, a beautiful thing, really. And that definitely we have to be careful with it. I don't want to cross any lines of making people feel bad about themselves, but yeah, I think in certain contexts, it's necessary.
Yeah. So then when we are talking about pornography, I recognize that we don't necessarily want to see the performers on screen as like somebody's child. And, when we're like getting all worked up, we don't necessarily want to be stressed out about whether or not the people were having a good day on set. But we also don't want to forget that these are human beings. Is there a healthy way to strike that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be surprised how many people like having a bit more of an intimate connection with their performers. But I also think that it's like maybe not good for us to, and maybe Sinn, you have a different perspective on this, but I think it's maybe good to not avoid that awareness that this person is someone's daughter or son or whoever, and that this person like maybe didn't have a good day on set, because that's the reality. Like sex works like any other job. It's not always
Yes.
perfect, and we're
Yes.
human beings. And I think maybe
Yes.
that can go quite a long way to humanizing us and our interactions if people could sit with that feeling and that discomfort a little.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. I think that it's like, that term is specifically too, where it's like, oh, well, this is someone's daughter. Okay, well, I realize that some people might need that in order to have any kind of empathy, but it's like, if we can try, okay, so maybe it's not someone's daughter. Do they not then deserve to be respected as a human being? So that's, I feel like one should think, hey, these are human beings, and can they think that and also be turned on and also jerk off and get off and enjoy what they're seeing sexually? Like, why can't we do those things and still see them as an object and still see them as a person? I feel like we can get there. We can be mature enough to do both things.
Yeah, I think
um,
that's a fair point that if you are old enough to be, buying and consuming pornography, that you should be old enough to be able to hold those two different ideas in your mind at the same time. But
yeah,
I know that our culture doesn't really teach that very well. I mean,
no,
Arden, you kind of alluded
terrible.
to this, but like modern porn is so much more interactive and consumer facing than say like
Mm.
a blockbuster movie. There's an expectation that you are able to like reach out and talk to the performers in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect with, an Avenger or,
Oh,
some big sort of movie star in that way. People want to
and
be able to like chat and tweet and make special requests and all these things. How do we navigate that as consumers in a way that's really respectful? I mean, do you have any tips for how people can, write those request emails or send those tweets without being an asshole?
yeah, I mean, just don't be an asshole. I mean, because it's like what you were saying is very true. I can't just like hop on Twitter and tweet at like Robert Downey Jr. and have a conversation with him, but you can hop on Twitter and tweet at Sin Sage and we'll talk. And anymore, it's like my business relies on that. I have to have these conversations. I have to be accessible to everyone. My email address has to be out there in the world so that I get paying clients for custom videos or for fans to join my sites and stuff like that. It's the only way. And that does make it difficult. There are definitely times when I'm like, gosh, if I was a little bit more famous, I'd have these kind of like personal protections that I don't because, just
Hmm.
like lack of access and money for that sort of thing and power. But at the same time, like I'm just the right amount of famous now where like I still do get these like online harassers and these people who, mistreat us and stuff. So, and I see how painful that can be, and I don't want more of that. So it's just kind of like a weird thing you got to live with. And oftentimes people are super friendly and kind and respectful, and then just like anything else in life, you're going to encounter people who are just don't know how to be that way.
Yeah, co-signed all of it.
Yeah. And Arden, I wanted to say something to what you spoke about before. Like, is it okay for me to be turned on by these things that feel misogynistic or feel, wrong or whatever? And because I have lots of those sort of kinks as well. And I grappled with it for a while before I was just like, hey, this is me and what I like. It's a fantasy. I don't want these things to happen in reality, and that is okay.
Yeah, yeah. Just to touch on like Esther Perel in that real quick, because I think we're
Oh,
all fanning over Esther Perel right now.
oh
Like
God, love her.
something that totally freed my mind was when she was talking about this woman who she was interviewing that felt bad about this fantasy she had of like, I probably won't get into details because it's graphic and I don't want to like trigger anyone in the audience or whatever, but it was
Consensual non-consent.
yeah, and her main thing was that like I know you feel guilty about this, but like you have casted every one of those people in your head. You casted who did that to you. You decided what happened. Like,
Yes.
well, the fantasy has these elements of like consensual non-consent. Like fundamentally, you are there for and excited about everything that's happening. And yeah, that was such a powerful message to walk away with.
Yeah. She's so smart.
Yeah, I really hate that kind of carelessly thrown around idea that the person with the true power in the scene is actually the sub because they have the ability to, turn it off. I feel like I hear that phrase a lot, but there's at least some truth to that there when we are talking about a consensual non-consent or really
Yeah.
any of these other more like edge play or kind of darker, more shadow self type of fantasies. It's
Yes.
a fantasy that you are creating and consenting to. And I know I've said this on this show before, but we don't have these same types of like hand wringing, anxious conversations when it comes to violent video games, when it comes to watching like incredibly graphic violence in film.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that we are so uncomfortable with having that type of like dirty sex when we're perfectly okay with, teenagers blowing each other's heads off in virtual reality?
And reality, sorry to say.
Yeah, there's truth to
Apparently, we're
that.
okay with that because nothing happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what you're speaking to now, it's something that's been just like so frustrating with all of these the MasterCard rules, because I have so many clips that are custom videos people ordered. And, there's a certain extent where I'm like, I get it. Like, I can't show, a throat being slit, even though it's fantasy, even though it's fake, even though I'm just making a movie. Like, I can't do that. No blood on this. Okay, fine. I can do that. But
I mean, you
now
can
with
do
these,
that in a student film or even
yes, you
honestly in like kind of a
can.
mediocre YouTube video, let alone a
Yep.
Hollywood blockbuster. But I
Yep.
didn't mean to interrupt your point.
Oh, no, you're okay. But yes, exactly. And so that's so frustrating that, like, but when I try to make my own little films just because there's like a nipple in it or something, well, now, MasterCard is like, the rules now are so strict. Like, I shoot a lot of wrestling content, let's say, fantasy wrestling content. And when you shoot fantasy wrestling, then sometimes like the other person gets knocked out or like choked out. And then they pretend to be like they're passed out and I'm the winner. And that's how the video ends. Well, now they're like, oh, they were whining and crying, and we can't show this excessive crying or showing that they're in pain. If they got choked out, they have to be shown conscious again before the video ends, or we won't post it. You won't be able to post it and all this stuff. And so it's just like the rules are getting like tighter and tighter for the type of content we can even sell. Whereas, if I could just talk to these credit card companies and be like, how is this any different than I'm sure people use your credit cards to go to movie theaters and watch this happening there. So why is it not okay just because I'm on a smaller scale making the same types of things? I think it's
It's
really
so strange that you have
problematic.
to like keep kosher in that way. You're
Oh my
allowed
gosh.
to have bloody violence, or you're allowed to have hot sex, but you're not allowed to combine the two at any time.
Right, even though it's very clearly a fantasy. Or, it's totally okay to have, 10 guys, cocks, and one asshole, but, the second you show like a fainting fetish or something, well, now it's off limits. And
Mm.
I'm saying all that should be fine. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, before we really get into the meat of this discussion, I wanted to ask about like specific types of performers. Obviously, supporting women of color or trans women or disabled women in porn means seeking out and buying their content. When does that become problematic? Or is there an upward limit on fetishizing particular body types?
Uh,
go
can you
ahead.
elaborate a little on that?
Hmm.
Yeah, I just think
Yeah.
about when you log on to some sort of tube site and you see like all Asian women, or when you see something that there are a lot of slurs that refer to women with disabilities, or to trans women, or
Trans
things
women.
like that. And
Yeah.
we're going to be talking in particular about trans women and how erotic media or pornography deals with trans bodies. But I guess I'm curious where that appreciation versus like fetishization, if it can become problematic, or what that would even look like.
Oh, definitely. Right. I mean, I feel like that this is super common that it crosses certain lines. Like it's difficult because there's the sexual liberation part of me that wants to say like, hey, whatever you're into, like that's what you're into and that's okay. But when like expressing what you're into becomes a process of like projecting that onto someone because they might fit a category that you
Hmm.
like a trans person or an Asian person or whatever, that's kind of where I see the issues. Like, for example, people assume because I'm a trans woman making adult content that they can expect certain things in my content, or that like, oh, if I just ask for this, I will get it because it's a trans body in porn. And it's like there's no consideration for like the person, me, who maybe my body doesn't work like that, or maybe I'm not into that. You don't know me, there are so many pieces there where people aren't really seeing you as a person creating content, but as like a vehicle for their fantasy. And it's hard. There's a lot of gray there. I think you know it when you see it, but it's not always super clear.
Yeah, and I agree with that on so many levels, obviously, but it's the same. Just it is hard when it's like we're talking about people of color, or what we were just saying. It's because you know if you are an Asian person, for example, you know that you can tag your content like with these certain tags, and it'll reach the eyes of the people who want to be seeing those things. But then at the same time, you know that maybe you're resistant to that, because you know as a human being that's not like the only representation of who you are. So when it comes to like monetizing these things, it's really hard to figure out like, you know, what is okay, and at which point am I just being like perpetuating something that I'm against. And I don't think there's an easy answer for that shit.
No.
But I love what you said to Arden about, you know, as a trans woman, that there are things that people go to you and they're like, well, why can't you make a video where you do this? And just in a little bit of like solidarity, only because people come to me a lot and they're like, wow, your ass is so big and beautiful. So where's that anal scene? And I'm just like, I can't do that. So like, if you got to know me a little bit, you would know this thing about me.
Yeah.
And so like that for me, when I try to create, I want to do it in a way that is like representative of a real human being. So when I work with a trans performer, I sit down, we talk beforehand, and like maybe I should even like film this conversations and include them or share them, because it's like this is what everyone should be doing, all whatever the sex you're having. But to be able to have that conversation before with someone and be like, hey, how do you like to have sex? What do you like to do? How do you like to be treated? How do you like to use these parts of your body? And I'm like, we will do that thing. We will do what you like. Like, it doesn't have to, again, like porn is very much about ticking these boxes. Mainstream porn, it's like you work with trans, this is how it has to go. Whereas you work with me and I'm like, let's do what you like. And that's what we'll do. And it'll be fine. And people buy it and they want to see it. So
Yeah,
Sure.
they definitely do.
Yeah.
I liked Arden's you know it when you see it kind of standard, because
Yeah.
you know I don't want to make any sort of rule that says that if you are attracted to you know, we've been talking in particular about Asian women. If you're attracted to Asian women and you gravitate towards that sort of content, that's totally fine and great and wonderful. If you are maybe exclusively seeking out that content, as a therapist, I would encourage you to perhaps be mindful and to maybe diversify your diet a little bit. I think that that's just good advice across the board in life, but particularly when we're talking about pornography and things along those lines. But where it gets really tricky is that piece where you start to sort of assume, well, because you're this, then you must also be that. And you start projecting that. Is that maybe the line that y'all would draw?
Yeah, I think at least for me personally, definitely it's the shorthanded expectation, and like, you know, I'm forgiving too. If somebody comes in, they say like they want this or whatever, and I'm like, hey, actually, I don't do that. That doesn't work for me. Most people will be totally chill. They'll be like, oh, cool, no big deal. How about this? And then we can do that instead. But I think it's more when people are like just entitled and upset that they don't get what they want from my body. I'm like, that's interesting. I don't know why you think that's gonna make me suddenly on your side, but
back to the don't be an asshole standard.
Yeah. It's not that hard. Back in the 90s, we had these bumper stickers that say, don't be a dick. Like, we need to bring that back.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, there's a lot to get to tonight, but Arden, I know we have somebody who's been waiting on the line for quite a while, so why don't we take a moment to check in on the phones, and then we will come back and really get into this conversation, in particular about the way the porn industry objectifies trans bodies and what we should be thinking, what we should be doing about that idea.
Awesome. Well, first up, in Tennessee, we've got Tony, pronouns are she, her. Tony, I think you are live. What's going on?
Hi. Yeah, so in regards to what you're talking about, at least from my perspective, the perspective of like a nigh on 50-year-old perv that's, you know, been absorbing content for 20 some odd years. I don't know. Would it not seem that it's like I'm sorry, I'm really nervous.
You're doing great.
When I go online to look for content, I like to look for trans porn just because, because I myself am trans.
Mhm.
So, so I can see myself in the character.
Yes.
I can't speak to your content, Arden, because I've never seen it. But I mean, I've seen tons of Sins, which you're amazing and you're awesome. Thank you, Sinn, for all the stuff you do.
Oh
You're
my
a true
God, thank
artist.
you. Oh, what? Wow. Thank you so much. Wow.
No, sorry, I apologize if that was out of line.
No, you're
That's
doing
cool.
totally fine. You're doing very well.
I've seen like different studios and stuff that you've worked with. And, if I were like just a regular everyday cis person, I could go online and look up a particular thing for cis people. And there's going to be a wide variety, right? If I want to look for lesbian porn, there's so many different kinds out there. But when you go to look for trans, at least from what I've seen, there's just not that much of a variety outside of, you've got like the sissy hypno stuff, or you've got just the raw sex stuff, which I'm personally not into. Just the sex stuff. I like all the build up, play and whatnot first.
Yeah.
And costumes. That's the best part. And a storyline, for crying out loud. I mean, and people joke about the storylines in porn, right? But
yeah,
I mean, there are some
definitely.
studios out there that do some really cool stuff.
Yes, there are.
I mean, especially if you're into like cheesecake, superhero, heroine stuff, tons of stuff. But if you want to look for something specific like that for trans content, I don't see it. And maybe I'm looking in a completely wrong place, but
well, I can steer you in some right directions for that. But I think, because a lot of porn, I mean, it's just like mainstream. It's like the easiest stuff to find is going to be always, I think, the most basic shit. Something that I see a lot with trans porn, I hope is starting to change a little bit, is like this the big reveal with the shocking face. Like, oh my God, there's a penis there. I don't appreciate that very much. I don't think it should be like a shock. I don't think it should be portrayed in that way. So I feel like that's what I'm trying to, in the stuff that I make with trans performers, get away from that and like push back against that sort of mainstream stuff. But that being said, so looking for queer studios, indie studios, not to plug myself, but smaller companies that are making more queer focused porn. Now, the stuff that I make doesn't always have a storyline, but sometimes there's like a little bit of one. But I also know that companies like Trans Sensual, Trans Fixed, these are big companies, and they're making beautiful stuff that does have storyline aspects to it. I don't know if you've heard of either of those companies. You can find them on Adult Time. Have you heard of that?
No, I had not.
Yeah, so adulttime.com, they make tons of porn of all the different genres, and they're making some really beautiful trans porn that's like shot really well and has storylines and stuff like that. And then Trouble Films is who distributes my work, and they've been a queer porn studio for the past like 15, 20 years maybe. So you'll find like all different gender expressions there. Crash Pad is another one. These are just like, they're just smaller, more niche, right? So, but you can find these things.
Yeah.
It's just go looking for them specifically and Googling and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely relate to what you're saying though, Tony. I know that like as a trans woman who's like, I'm into kink, I like being submissive. I'm total hardcore sub through and through. And there is almost no porn of like, well, that's not true. There is porn of trans women being submissive, but by and large, the focus is like look at this trans girl's big dick. Oh my God, this trans girl's fucking this person. It's always like they basically, in my opinion, treat trans women like men with breasts. It feels like in a lot of porn sets, like
Yes.
whatever you can do with a man, you can do with a trans woman, basically. Nobody really considers that like our bodies are unique or have unique needs or like things that we'd like individually. It's definitely lacking in any variety. And I feel the frustration there. It's definitely not easy to enjoy porn that is like not representing you well. And I definitely think Adult Time is great. They have such awesome, incredible quality content. So that, I would say it's a good place to start. But I just want to say like, I feel you and I'm sorry. I get it. That sucks.
When
And
you're,
maybe
you're
I can-
both talking specifically about an issue that I think applies really broadly, that I just kind of want to highlight for everybody else listening, that if you just go and check like the top 10 videos on Pornhub or whatever else, you are going to get that sort of like cookie cutter, sometimes problematic, like everything is sort of steered in a very specific direction. And if that's your relationship with pornography and that's all you're familiar with, you might think that that's just all porn is 5 minutes of meat slapping against each other and then you're done. And, you know, as Tony is describing, there is such a wide variety of interesting and beautiful art out there, but you got to pay for it. You have to participate in the economics in it. And you know, I'm somebody who listens to a bunch of movie podcasts and I read a bunch of articles about movies that are coming out. And you don't necessarily need to be that type of person to go to the cinema and see whatever the, you know, big blockbuster of the week is. But there's definitely something to be said about taking a little bit of interest in your hobbies and being willing to spend some time actually diving in and digging into these things. So, Tony, I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah,
no
and
worries.
maybe we can even share some links or something with Tony, or you can look at our links and hit us up on social media. And I know I'd be happy to share some of the places that I know for sure.
Yeah, definitely. DMs are always open.
Yep.
Awesome. And the customs I got from you, Sinn, were fantastic, by the way.
Oh my gosh, I'm like, which ones? But that's awesome. Thank you so much for patronizing me.
You want, well, I have quite a bit over the years.
Oh my gosh. So you have to tell me, you have to send me an email, remind me who you are specifically.
Okay. Oh, well, thank you.
Right.
And thank you for the conversation and talking about this kind of subject.
Yeah. Thank you for calling in, Tony. We really appreciate it. And call back soon.
Oh, hey, Arden, you and Matt should totally do a set based on magician and magician assistant.
That would be pretty good. We'll see if I can convince him. I don't know if you would want to be in a video, but we'll see. Thanks, Tony.
Word. Okay, bye.
Well, it's a really great primer for everything that I want to talk to the two of you about here in just a moment. But for now, let's take this opportunity to take a look at what's going on around the rest of the ACA.
We're all just told, bottle it up. Like, keep it inside. Don't even masturbate for that matter. Like, just take all those hormones and just repress them.
Yeah,
and then
you'll
by
go
the time
blind and get hairy palms.
It's always easier to it's easier to throw out bullshit than to deconstruct it, right? Like somebody could throw bullshit out for 2 minutes and it could take an hour to explain why that's wrong.
Penguins actually have prostitution.
Yep.
They will swap stones for sex. Stones to protect the young for sex.
Have you demonstrated that it's not just a book? Because to me, it seems that nobody's like, this is like saying I have an idea of a unicorn in my head and I'm going, have you demonstrated outside of inside your head that there's a unicorn? No.
Dan has asked me to make it very clear that I am not, in fact, his father. It was one of the most disturbing things that evidently has ever happened to him.
Well, I am way too curious about whatever they were talking about. I need to go back
Yeah.
and catch some of those episodes. But for now, the main idea that I wanted to talk about tonight was sort of the healthfulness and the boundaries in seeking out trans performers. Obviously, if that's the language that we're using and that's sort of the context that we're operating from, we're all on board. Like, we're all in favor of supporting trans artists in that way. But when we see a tube site that has a category filter that's using a slur, not so much. Ultimately, though, what's the difference here?
Between porn without slurs and porn with slurs? Is that kind of what you're...
Yeah, I mean, I guess to an extent.
I mean, I definitely remember when those bans happened that people were kind of jokingly like, oh, well, now this is going to make it even harder to find the non-scuzzy trans porn because I know I can't... every porn that says transgender is going to be the same as the ones that say, female or tranny or whatever they're going to say. So it's I mean, that's like a joke, but like more seriously, I think it's, in my opinion, I think what it does, at least for me, like as a trans performer, is kind of like it calms some of those like those undercurrents of like internal, like implicit bias that get fostered in that kind of environment. Like, if it's acceptable to use slurs to refer to trans people when you're jerking off or watching porn, then like clearly it's not objectionable to you to call a trans woman by a slur. Like, if you're okay with it here, then like, I'm willing to bet some of those people wouldn't say that to me in person, but if you're willing to watch it here, clearly it's not an issue for you, is my point. I think it kind of helps quell that sort of underlying thing. So I can actually work with just like this individual's issues and not maybe necessarily some like broader cultural baggage that they're carrying around, but it's definitely not a perfect solution, right? It's not like a panacea. It's not like suddenly everyone's pro-trans. All my customers are so awesome and easy to get along with. But it definitely helps, I think.
Yeah, well, let me ask y'all both to explain that a little bit, because you both sort of referenced this this moment in time, or this tipping point where all of a sudden those slurs started to sort of disappear. I mean, do I have that right? Can y'all speak about that at all? Not disappear from the world, but maybe
Right.
disappear from like some of our porn categories.
Yeah, I mean, well, I can't remember if we were talking about this when we were on the air or not, but for example, Chelsea Poe is like prominent queer trans woman activist, and when she entered the industry, she kind of like took up the banner and shield and was like, hey, let's stop using these slurs. These are slurs. And, as a community of basically, I mean, I like to feel like porn is sort of a little bit of trying to be progressive in some ways. And she's like, we need to stop doing this like within our community of pornographers, right? Like, we need it, like, if we're going to work with these women, we should refer to them in the ways they want to be referred, and not just use these terms to try to like get people to watch what we're doing. And so she really got these big so there was this there's this company called Groovy, and they're all trans content, but they were using those slurs, and she basically pushed until they have stopped using those slurs completely, and in fact kind of like turned to the other direction and are being better and more representative. That being said, it's not a perfect company, and but I think it does make a difference, because like I'll get emails sometimes like, oh, can you make a video with this like slur? And I'm like, hey, this is just an education moment. That is actually a hateful slur, so we can just use the word trans. And every single time I do that, I never get somebody coming back at me with like, oh, fuck you PC police or whatever. They're always just like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. Those are just the terms that I've seen, so I thought that that's what we use. And so they're very open to that. It's just a matter of like, the more we use those terms, the proper terms, the more we put that out there, and we don't tolerate the slur is being used anymore. I think that it's just stuff that seeps into the culture at large. At least I hope.
Yeah, we certainly don't advocate the idea of porn as sex education, but I mean, let's
Right.
be realistic. There are a lot of young adults, there are frankly a lot of teenagers who are discovering sexuality, and perhaps their first or even only interactions with trans folks is through that lens and through like that particular label up at the top of the marquee. So I can't help but feel like it's a good thing that we have, you know, in a lot of ways eradicated that. Are there, Arden, you kind of talked about like some unintended consequences. I know you were sort of joking, but is there any other side to that coin?
I mean, like, it's not like, so we've stopped calling it she-male porn, right? Like, sorry if anyone in the audience is bothered by that. I'm going to say it. I kind of like making people uncomfortable, and I've got my past because I'm trans. So,
Yeah, like you can say it. I won't.
Well, the label has gone away. The genre of like she-male porn has absolutely not gone away. And
Sure.
if you type that into Pornhub, like you're still going to get results. It's
Mhm.
not like they've like, it's not like it's going to say, oops, you meant transgender. And like, you know, the Pornhub's not going to have an educating moment with you. But,
Right.
yeah, you know, it's like, I don't know. I think it's just kind of swept under the rug to some degree. It does help. And this is part of progress, right? It's not going to be like a perfect linear journey. That's totally cool. But like, I do think there are some ways in which changing the way we talk about these things has kind of swept some of the stuff under the rug without changing, you know, people's minds or their behavior about it.
Attitude. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, then what does discrimination look like for trans performers? I mean, we've touched around the edges of it, and I'm sure that's a very long list, but you know, the audience, I think, can only imagine so much what that must actually feel like. I'd love to hear some of y'all's stories about what kinds of things you may be seeing.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't want to, I feel like I'm talking so much.
No, Arden, I feel like it's very important to like let you speak first. I do not want to be like the one who's like, let me answer all these questions on behalf
No,
of
that's
trans
totally
people.
okay. We love that here. So that's fine. But
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think it's that different from the discrimination that like we experience like broadly in our culture. And kind of that relates back to what I was saying earlier, where trans women in porn are very much just kind of treated like men with breasts. Like the things that we're kind of like expected to do and are very similar to the things that you would probably expect like a cis male performer to do. So for me, that's kind of an issue because like, you know,
yes.
Well, I totally respect you. Like if you love like big T-girl dick and like that you just want to see them shooting ropes of cum, that's awesome. Good for you. Like have at it. But like the expectation that my body can perform that way is where it becomes an issue. Cause like most trans women that are being properly, sorry, let me phrase this a little bit more carefully. Most binary trans women who are on HRT and like medicated properly with like a physician are not going to be able to do those things. Like that's not how my body works. So it's kind of just like being treated like a novelty toy. And like, and the fear with that comes in too is like, I want to have GRS eventually. What's going to happen if suddenly I don't have a dick and the novelty of me being a trans performer is gone? You know, I don't think that I would become destitute, but I definitely know a significant portion of my customers would drop off the face of the earth. That's kind of where I think discrimination in porn towards trans women is where, at least where it impacts me the most.
Yeah.
But there's, I'm sure I've touched on just the surface of it.
Yes. So I mean, I've got some stories that kind of highlight that discrimination in the industry. And first of all, I want to say everything that Arden just said, especially about, you know, and I will say that these bigger studios, the Adult Times and stuff like that, when you get booked as a trans woman to do scenes for them, like you are expected to use your cock in ways that it may not work for you. And to me, I think that is hugely problematic. I think we should make the stuff that the people are capable of making and want to be making. But so that is one form of it for sure. And that's why, like, with my little indie fucking queer porn productions, like, I make it very clear that that is not a thing that has to happen. So because I want that different representation, that wide variety of queer representation. But
Yeah.
the other thing is where I've seen this discrimination is that cis straight performers, or, you know, they'll do girl and work with cis men, can be there's a lot of discrimination against male performers who we call them crossover. So they'll either work, also do gay work. So they're bisexual people and they do both, or they work with trans women. And there has been this stigma against that, to where then cis female performers won't work with those men. And I find that to be just this blatant homophobic discrimination, because I've even, like, we have meetings sometimes, or we used to in LA and stuff, to address certain, like, common issues. And this sort of homophobic discrimination can cause problems, has caused problems in the past. And there's a variety of performers at this meeting, and I was just stating, like, I don't understand why, if they have the same test, the same STD test that we all go and do, then why would you not perform with this person just because they've also performed with, men or trans women or whatever? And I feel like it's this really old form of, I mean, these days it's an old form of kind of like HIV discrimination, and feeling like that just because they do this, then they're more at risk of getting it. And I just don't. What basically this one woman told me is that she doesn't feel she can trust those people because she thinks they're more likely to go and do something, like after you get tested and then before you do the scene with someone else, you've then gone off to a bathhouse or some shit. Like, I don't even know. Like, to me, it was such an ancient way of talking about these things that and I'm ultimately this person who is like, you don't have to work with anyone you don't want to, for any reason you don't want to. But I also feel like you should not talk about your reasons then, because they will sound like you are just being bigoted because someone is different from you. And so whereas I'm not sure, that was like 5-ish years ago now, maybe a little less, but I think things are getting better with that. But in the mainstream industry, on the side of things, like, definitely that has been a problem.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, we talk all the time about sort of unrealistic body expectations in porn, but I really appreciate the two of y'all highlighting some of the unrealistic expectations that exist specifically in trans porn. I know this is a topic that not a lot of cis people are educating themselves on, or are aware of, and are maybe contributing to in some perhaps problematic ways. Like you said, Arden, there's nothing wrong with being drawn towards, big, hard cocks. Like, that's fine and great and wonderful. But if that's the only thing that we're seeing, people may not have a good understanding of how, I don't want to say all or even most, but how many, many trans women relate to their penis.
Yeah, the variety of ways in which trans women can relate to their penis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's extremely true. There's definitely like only one kind of like, well, I won't say that. I guess there's two. There's like the tiny micro penis make fun of me dick, and then you have just like, it's like the big throbbing cock and like just come. That's all anyone ever wants to talk about. So sorry, rip YouTube monetization. I apologize to the producers, but yeah.
Yeah. Is there a particular like type of person, or maybe a specific stereotype of a consumer that is drawn to some of this content in a problematic way, or that people should be aware of, or maybe try not to be themselves?
Oh, wow. Yes. I mean, I think there are kind of like a lot of different kinds of people who are drawn in for like problematic reasons, or how they engage with it can be problematic. Like like one really common thing that even if you're just a trans woman on Twitter, I'm sure you've gotten this is people who were like, "Ooh, I think you're so hot, you're so sexy, I'm so into you, I love this content that you made, but I'm really into like your dick. What does that mean for my sexuality? Am I gay or straight?" That to me is always kind of a problem. Like maybe some girls like to, or performers like to use their platform this way. I'm not like a therapist. I'm not going to be able to tell you what your
That's
sexuality
a somewhat
is.
unreasonable expectation there.
Yeah. Like, and I don't know you. Maybe you are gay. I don't know. I literally know nothing about you. All I know about you right now is that you bought my content, and that you have some presumptions about me. I guess similarly to kind of before, I think you kind of know it when you see it is the biggest concern. Like, I think I also would say that if you have the privilege of saying no to a customer or two, because that's definitely a privileged thing. I'm not going to act like it's not. Not being afraid of saying, "Hey, I totally respect you and you're right to be into this. I don't think we're a good match. You should probably find someone else to make you this kind of content." Yeah.
I've done that plenty of times.
Oh yeah. So many.
Well, I know that our culture is evolving, that our relationship and our understanding, very broadly speaking, of trans bodies is changing. I still think that it's really easy to make mistakes in this space, and I hear the two of you being very, I don't know, I guess I would say accepting of all of that, and I have to say, like, as a therapist and as an activist, it makes me feel perhaps a little bit protective of y'all, and I don't mean to overstep my bounds there, but I guess I'm curious about that line of how often or in what ways you can be accommodating, and when that just crosses a line, and when something becomes despicable or more than you can handle. Can y'all speak on that at all?
Well, I just want to say, like, kind of real quickly, I think one of the reasons why, well, I think there's multi prongs here. So about 10 years ago or so, I had never been with a trans woman before, but I was very curious. I would say even that I'm kind of guilty of maybe fetishizing or compartmentalizing trans women. And I remember, gosh, I was on this show and I met some trans women, and I asked this terrible question, and I'm confessing right now. This was 10 years ago. But I said to her, I was like, I really want to have sex with a trans woman, but I just don't even know, like, how would I do that? Because I'm so used to having sex with, like, cis women, and then I know how to have sex with my boyfriend, but like, how would I make that, And she was like, you're just having sex with a girl. And I look back on myself, the fact that I even asked her that question, it's cringe fest 2021. Like, it hurts my heart. But the point is that my journey since then of understanding, and just coming to a more enlightened place, right? There has to be room to let people learn. It was my ignorance. That was where I was. I was just ignorant. And I have opened myself up to learning and understanding on a different level. And so now I am better. And so I want people to feel that space. If every time someone misgenders an NB person, or someone misgenders someone, and they don't mean to be cruel and callous, but the response is, how fucking dare you, and anger and these things, then I think that we're just going to push people away and make them more nervous and more like justify their ignorance and stuff like that than
Mm.
if we are a little bit more understanding that it takes time, or at least it takes like education. It takes you got to see it. You know, I hope I'm explaining myself
Sure.
correctly here.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, like, I feel like everything that I do, I always try to be like, I want as many people to care about trans rights as I can convince to care. And so for
Yes.
me, like a big part of that is giving people the freedom to be wrong. And I may have to say, like, well, okay, I totally get what you're trying to do there. Probably wouldn't use that word in the future. It's cool right
Yeah.
now. I'm not gonna like crucify you for it, but somebody else might in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to extend so much empathy to people who are learning, because I know even me, like I hold internalized transphobia. I know early in my transition, I would look at other trans people who I could identify were trans, and I would be like, oh my God, like I think X, Y, or Z about them. Like people are going to think that about me. And then realizing like, wait, no, I'm just revealing that I hold these biases about trans people and I am a trans person. So like, on what grounds do I have to be like rude to someone who's ignorant if I'm realizing that like I'm still biased against a group that I'm a part of? I think that's a really common experience of marginalized people when you're wrestling with internalized bigotry, to like not know what to do with that. And I understand, and I'm so deeply empathetic to people who like lash out at bigots, because like I get it. It's
Yeah.
we don't always all have the spoons to react in the most measured way, right? Shit's gonna happen. But yeah, I do definitely try to put an effort to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're probably not malicious and that they're just ignorant. And
Yeah.
if after that they show themselves to be an asshole, then fuck it. I
Right.
can say whatever I want to them.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, well, how can folks who are watching this tonight not just not be an asshole, but actually become better consumers? You know, we're always telling people to pay for their porn, and I think that's got to be like the first, second, and third policy here. But what else can people be doing with their dollars or with their habits to just make this less of an issue for future generations?
Gosh.
Like
What a
bigotry, make bigotry less of an issue.
Yeah, bigotry in porn, bigotry in particularly with like trans porn, and just be pushing things in the right direction. Like you talked about some changes in the industry and the removal of slurs in a lot of places. Seems to me that it might be worth being aware when you do find a porn space that is using some of those slurs, to maybe not give them your money, to disappear from that particular space. Is
Yeah.
there anything else that stands out as a way to vote with our dollars and to make the world a better place through the way we spend our porn money?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like supporting like independent people and small creators and small studios, I think that's so huge. Like I don't know. If you want to see queer porn, you want to see queer representation in porn, that's where this stuff is happening, you know?
Yeah.
Like so I guess I don't know. And being like willing to like collaborate with yeah, I very much think of all of this as like a collaborative project. Like I want to help you get the best product that I can produce for you, if I can even make something for you, you know?
Yeah.
So just kind of being like open-minded when you show up, and like and cooperative, and not combative if like, you know, X, Y, or Z isn't exactly what you were hoping for, or exactly like if you had expectations for what subscribing to a trans OnlyFans account would be, like, you know, like wrestling with that. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd say too, it's hard because when it comes to porn, you know, it's sadly very, very capitalistic. I mean, it's where the money is going, that's what they're going to continue making. So if the money is always going to these sites like Brazzers, where like a cock shows up and this big shocked face is happening, and like that's what people are clicking on and that's what people are buying, we're just going to see more of that.
Yeah.
and it's just like a numbers game really at that point. But you know, there really is something to be said for members of websites. So if you're a member of browsers, you pay for it. If you're a member of an adult time website, or you know, transfixed and stuff like that, they listen to their customers, they listen to their members. So you know, this is why, like, I tell people when they're like, oh, do a scene with so and so, I'm like, contact the companies and tell them hire Sinn Sage with so and so. Like, they will listen to that. They don't fucking listen to me. I'm like, book me with this girl, and they never do. So I try to get them to my house so we can just make our own shit, but that's hard sometimes. But when you do go on these sites and you're like, I want to see more of, you know, soft dick trans getting fucked in the butt or something like that, rather than always, oh, I want to see that trans girl like rail this dude or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, they have plenty of that. There's plenty of that for you to see. The stuff that they're not making is what you need to tell them that you want to see. And so if you're a member, that's who they're going to listen to. You can't just go to them on Twitter and be like, hey, you should do this. They do not care. But if it's a paying member, they will actually, and they see more, you know, you can start your own little campaign almost, get other members to all send in a message and say, this is the type of stuff that we want to see more of. And then that could make some change. But again, like all change and all progress, it's fucking long and it's fucking slow.
Sure.
But you got to start somewhere. So. And it's funny that you said that. Like, I said that like just yesterday. I'm trying to make the porn that I want to see in the world, you know, and make the world hopefully a little bit, tiny bit of a better place just by being more diverse with my little fucking porn that I make. But it does have a ripple effect. It does have like a butterfly effect, I think.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
Be the porn you want to see in the world might be my new favorite catchphrase. I'm gonna see if I can't get that done up on a t-shirt or whatever else. I do want to remind people very briefly that we've got a little bit left here in the show. There's just enough time to sneak in a call if you'd like to reach out to us. We're at 512-991-9242, and we promise we'll be gentle. We're obviously getting into some conversation that makes a lot of people really uncomfortable, and so I get why people are hesitant to reach out, but I am so excited to be talking about these things with y'all and to see what, if anything, we might be able to do to kind of push the needle and to change things here. With regards to the other side of the camera, we've talked a little bit about changes in the industry, but as sex worker advocates, how do y'all feel about sort of the state or maybe the direction of trans rights within that sex work sphere?
Well, here in Vegas, I just want to say things are going very well for trans representation, at least in my little bubble.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like broadly there's very little momentum. It could be that I'm ignorant to it, so I would love to hear otherwise, but it doesn't really feel like there's a big push for, at least like specifically trans sex workers' rights more broadly. That's really unfortunate, because I definitely have always hammered down that, like, I don't think we can say that we've seen trans rights secured in the States until there are sex workers' rights as well, because trans rights and sex workers' rights have so much overlap. Like, if you really want people's quality of life and their material conditions to improve, like, liberating sex work is just as important of a goal as liberating trans people and seeing more legislation move in that can secure those rights for trans people. But unfortunately, I don't really think there's like a single significant like movement. Like, you know, there's like the Trans Law Center and like a few other organizations are keeping track of all the bills that have been popping up in every state for like trans sports laws and things like this. I don't really see anything like that. I think it's because right now the focus is like the girl on your middle school soccer team, you know, that's apparently going to destroy the fabric of Western society. So that, but we'll see. I'm hopeful, but I won't hold my breath.
Well, I do want to specify that when I said what I said about here in Vegas, I mean specifically within the industry only, like within the porn industry.
Mhm.
Certainly not within sex workers' rights in general and stuff. And
Yeah.
and as far as we can see, any progress that we've made with trans rights or at least trans acceptance in the States, let us not forget that for our brothers across the pond, it is our brothers and sisters and MBs across the pond, it is fucked up right now. It
Yeah.
is really bad in the UK. It is dangerous and like it breaks my heart out. It like gives me chills to even fucking talk about it. So there's still, I think we're still kind of in the beginning stages of this fight. I feel, and it's really just LGBTQ, across the board, because I think for a lot of queer people, when marriage equality happened, it was like, phew, cool. We can like put the fucking work boots down and move
Queer
on with
rights
our life.
accomplished.
Yeah, and it's just like, nope, that was like one amazing milestone. Now let's get on to the rest of the work that we've got to do because we're not fucking there. So,
No. Yeah, Arden, I don't mean to put you too much on the spot, but I'm really curious about this notion of the overlap between sex worker rights and trans rights. How do those two things dovetail into each other?
Oh my goodness. Well, like when we're talking about like trans people are like overwhelmingly disproportionately more likely to be homeless and poor and all of these things.
Mhm.
And sex work is often while the bar for how likely you are to be like extremely successful at it may still be very high. The barrier for entry for sex work and porn and stuff is much lower, especially nowadays. So for a lot of trans people, in order to afford, like I do well for myself, I'm successful, and I still can't afford like every procedure I would like to have at this point in time. Like these things are very expensive, especially when insurance isn't covering it. So like a lot of trans people, in order to lift themselves out of poverty and have a chance at affording medical transition without going into massive debt, turn to sex work. It's a massive part of the community, and I know for a lot of trans people, they kind of feel like it's their only option. I know there was a poll in the UK that like 1 in 3 employers say if given 2 identical resumes and one was trans, I believe I'm saying this correctly, so hopefully I'm not spreading misinfo. But they said they wouldn't be as likely to hire the trans candidate because like I've heard that myself growing up. I remember applying for jobs as a little trans teen and hearing that they were worried about how that would affect business and things like that, So it's no wonder that a lot of trans women turn to the areas where it's the lowest barrier for entry. So that's kind of my pitch, is that we rely on sex work, a lot of us, to survive and to get the necessary medications that we need and treatments. Until sex work is decriminalized or liberated or whatever the goal is going to be, trans people are still, even if we secure, like, you can't discriminate me again in the job or whatever, like, there's still going to be trans women disproportionately in sex work just to survive. That's kind of my spiel.
That is an important spiel that people need to keep in mind for sure. I think, like the liberation, I love that, of sex work is, if we could get there first, like that would change the world. Change so much.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak too out of pocket, as I don't believe any of us are members of that community, but so many of the things that you're talking about in terms of sort of employment of last resort for certain folks and protections and these different things, I think we need to recall also applies to folks with disabilities who oftentimes are also fetishized. I mean, depending on the type of disability that we're talking about, there is a whole industry of pornography that is built around many of these same types of perhaps misconceptions or dehumanizations that can become really problematic as well.
Can you speak a little more explicitly, like specifically?
Yeah, well, so in particular, people who have specific handicaps, people who have amputations and other
Mm,
perhaps more extreme aspects of their body that people might gravitate towards because of their uniqueness or the sort of that exoticness component are going to be
okay.
facing a lot of these discriminations that we're talking about. And then
Yeah.
on the other side of things, you have very similar concerns in terms of lack of access to employment, lack of access
Oh God.
to
Yeah.
medical care, medical expenses. I mean, I don't want to try and put an apple directly next to an orange, but there are some meaningful similarities that I think are worth at least acknowledging in this space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But again, it is hard. It's almost like a line that we can't exactly define because it's like on the one hand, we don't want to treat people like fetishize a human being with a disability, but then if they can, empower themselves with that to make a living for themselves, whereas otherwise it's extremely difficult, well, then we want to support that too, right? So it is just like
We want to support
it's
that
too
too.
wiggly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be if we had a social safety net, if we had a
Right.
circumstance in which people who were trans, people who were disabled, or any of these other concerns had opportunities to access good employment, to not be
Yes.
worried
Yep.
about their day to day in a lot of ways. I mean,
Yeah.
if we are talking about sex work and acknowledging that it's a profession that a lot of people choose willingly and excitedly. I mean, Sin, we've had that conversation with you on this show a
Yeah.
number of times, how this was something that you very much gravitated towards.
Oh
But
yeah.
it is worth acknowledging that for many folks, sex work writ large is a profession of last resort. And that wouldn't be the case. We wouldn't have to agonize over that access piece
Right.
if
Or
we were providing better accommodations to folks more generally.
or
Mm.
maybe instead of saying last resort, maybe like best resort under the circumstances.
Sure. Yeah. Best
Because
Yeah.
available
yeah,
under dire circumstances. Yeah.
right, right.
I do think that like that's exactly why decriminalization is so important though, because like
Yeah.
if somebody is being fetishized, and like I know for me, like if I turned away everyone who was not into something that I was explicitly into, I probably wouldn't have much of a customer base, to be completely
Oh
honest.
yeah.
Like,
Mm.
right? So like there is some
Yeah,
level of accommodating of
of
fetishization
course.
that I have to
Yeah.
do. And if sex work were decriminalized, like I'm in a good space where like if it's becoming too much for me, I can take a day off, I can walk away, and that's okay. But like if somebody is in the position where they're in dire circumstances and they're doing this out of necessity, like they can't turn it off and walk away. So I think maybe that's more of a solution to this kind of like where's the line on fetishization thing, because like
Yeah.
if people have the freedom to be able to walk away and not fear that it's going to like cost them their housing or their education or their medical
Yeah.
supplies, like I think that would empower people to be able to protect themselves a little bit better.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Sure. And I don't want to get too deep or too far out over my skis in the philosophy of economics and all of these different types of things. But it is worth saying that there is a sort of coercive element to living in a capitalistic society.
Oh, 100%. Like
Yeah.
that's a key factor of living in a capitalistic
Yeah.
society. Like
Well, and we all find ourselves sort of going to work when we don't want to. And we all find ourselves, putting on something of a customer service voice and these
oh
other
yeah.
things. But I just want to, I suppose, highlight the fact that for many, many, many people, there are a lot fewer options. And like Arden's been highlighting, a lot fewer opportunities to say no, thank you. And that coercion
Yes.
can become a much more powerful force.
Mm.
That's for sure. And another thing to speak to the disabilities, there's another side of that as well. Many of us have invisible disabilities.
Hmm.
And
So
those
true.
are things you can't see just by looking at someone. And, sex work has been a fucking haven for people who have invisible disabilities because it's like, if you were working a traditional 9 to 5 and you can't make it in on a particular day because you're having a flare up of something or another, well, sucks for you and you're fired then. You know what I mean? But it's like in this job, it's like, well, thank God I have a little bit of space and then I can do the work when my flare up goes down or whatever the issue might be. I mean, this would be mental health stuff too. That is just ignored and treated like that's not a disability. You know, it's like, well, okay, but it is though. And like, so when we have stuff like this, it's like, I can work this job where I have control over my schedule, where I have control over whether or not I even can work that day, and things like that, because I'm working for myself and stuff. So I just think that people are always like, no, you know, the anti-sex work people are like, let's just get rid of this across the board and you can go find other kinds of work. It's like, oh, most people can't, you know, who have especially like invisible disabilities and stuff like that. So it's God, I mean, in that respect, it's a godsend.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, this is a battle line that we see so often in like conservative versus progressive talking points. Just that idea of, well, absolutely no abortion, that's wrong, but we're not going to do much of anything to help accommodate a unwanted pregnancy or accommodate you know, taking care of foster children and these kinds of things. We're not necessarily interested in disability rights or providing that social safety net in these ways, but we're also not going to create any workplace protections that would allow somebody to have a typical 9-to-5 job. And we desperately want to steer people away from becoming pornographers, but we're not going to do much of anything to empower people to have the opportunity to choose a profession that better suits them.
Yeah.
Sad.
Well, now that we have, you know, made ourselves at least a little bit sad and acknowledged sort of like the scope of the problem, are there any sex worker resources or organizations that y'all would like to point people towards?
Yeah, there's definitely so here in Las Vegas there is a place called Sex Worker it's called SWAID, Sex Worker Aid Las Vegas. Although I think that there might be many chapters of it, but it's like a mutual aid group here that does send money to people who are in need, sex workers who are in need here and now. So that's a place I definitely want to highlight. They take donations and they do really great stuff. So you can maybe check out and see if there's a chapter in your area. Swap Behind Bars. You can Google that, SWOP Behind Bars, as another sex worker organization that seeks to get sex workers out of jail, help them out with resources and stuff like that. Those would be some good places to start.
Yeah, SWAP is great. Sex work outreach project. Is that what it is?
Yes,
I can't remember.
I believe so,
Yeah, they seem pretty good from what I've seen. I also like that they had it was like a news and updates thing where they would like tell you about like cases and stuff that they're like working on. That I love that. I think that's so great to like drum up attention on. Like we don't have like 50 cases like there are for like the trans sports laws right now, but like when cases do pop up in the media about like sex workers' rights, that we can like drum up a lot of attention about it, because that definitely has impacted other actions in the past. So I think that's great. Maybe not so much an organization, but definitely like I think mutual aid is a great place to start. Like if you know a sex worker who is struggling, like don't be afraid to donate. Like I know a lot of people have hesitations about donating to like GoFundMe's and stuff that they don't see, but like if you can part with $5 and you don't know how it gets used, like I think you could like make a huge difference in someone's life, and maybe they will use it in a way you don't approve of, but like guess what? Sucks for you. Their life is probably harder for you if they need this to begin with, and if they need like well, I won't endorse anything that I shouldn't while we're live on air, but I think you get my idea. Like I think mutual aid's great. Let people decide how to use the support themselves. I think that's a lovely thing.
Yes. And that's basically like how I was taught, is that, you know, when you see someone asking for money on the corner of the street, they're obviously in need, and you you just help them if you can. If you can afford, if you think that they probably need that $5 more than you do, just fucking give it to them and don't concern yourself. Your job is over. What they do with that money, that is their business. What you do, the fact that you are giving, that is your business. And then your job has ended when you've given it. And that's basically my theory. I just want to give the help when it's being asked for. And what happens after that, like, that's their business. So I think that's a really, really important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And with the mutual aid, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And you can see that all over Twitter. There are people asking for help all the time. And so I know for me, like when I got my freaking check for COVID or whatever from the government, and I was like, yo, I don't need all this. I went on to Twitter and I was like, who's got to GoFundMe? Like, let's go. I'm giving you this money because you need it more than I do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm always blown away by the organization and the mutual aid, just the connections within the sex worker community. And in a lot of ways, I suppose it makes me sad because I recognize that it's coming from a place of deep need, that oftentimes sex workers are obligated to organize in these ways in order to mutually protect each other. But it's also just incredibly heartwarming and so different from the kind of cultural narrative around these types of spaces, just to recognize how much advocacy work really does go on here.
So much. A lot. And like you were saying, Arden, too, it's like when the stories sort of get amplified. I mean, a real-time recent example of that would be the OnlyFans thing. I feel like when OnlyFans was like, okay, we're kicking off sex workers, there was just this huge reaction, not just from sex workers. I mean, mainstream media was talking about this, and they were saying, wow, the people who built this platform are getting kicked off of it. And we're talking about mainstream media, like kind of literally standing up for sex workers' rights. And, you know, it was a small step in the face of MasterCard's decisions, which they didn't change. But the fact that it changed OnlyFans' decision shows that we can make action happen.
There's real power here.
Yes.
We can definitely make our voices heard. I think there's something to be said about the person who takes a little too much pride in their Twitter activism. But that being said, it's a good tool. We can definitely get a message out very quickly and to so many people through that. And I think social media is definitely tipping the scales and the balances of power here. And that's a good thing to see.
You'll love to hear it.
I hate social media and for so many reasons, but it can be positive sometimes too.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear from both of y'all here, but I'm going to ask Arden to go first. As we kind of wrap it up for the night, what are some final thoughts or just impressions that you want to leave with the audience about, I guess, about how to navigate trans porn?
Oh, gosh. How to sum it all up. I guess like probably, I mean, we've kind of talked on this. I don't want to rehash too many points. But definitely remember that we're not men with breasts. I may have a dick, but that doesn't mean it functions the way you think or you want it to. Treat me like a human being. Don't be an asshole. What else? Oh yeah. Also, Sinn is so fucking smart and hot and awesome. So you should definitely go check out her stuff. That's my other first impression.
Oh my goodness.
It's a good thought to leave everybody with.
Oh my gosh, I'm fucking honored. Thank you so much. So for me, I think that especially when it comes to trans creators, which I feel like pretty much anyone anymore that you're seeing in a video is also a creator. So what I would love to encourage people to do is when you are watching trans porn, make note of the performers that you like, and then please go seek their stuff out, because the payment that they got was a one-time check. We don't get residuals from performances with big companies. So when you then go find the performers and you go to their OnlyFans or you go to their website, you order customs from them, like that is how you are uplifting, supporting sex workers of all kinds, but especially trans sex workers. You know, show them your direct support, and that makes an actual difference in their lives. So, well, in all of our lives. So again, it just comes down to that pay for your porn stuff. Obviously, we're very encouraging of that here, but finding and seeking out specific performers that you like and find the stuff they're making and support them that way. I mean, it really does make a much bigger difference than, you know, like a membership to Brazzers. That trickle down isn't quite working that way. So please go find them on Twitter. I use Google for this shit. So when I'm like, oh, I really like that person, but I go to Twitter and I'm not finding them on Twitter, I will Google so-and-so's Twitter account, so-and-so's OnlyFans account. And it's usually within the first, 5 options. So please do those things. And also engage with their content. If you're on their OnlyFans, and this is a little bit for me too, but you have no idea how much just clicking that like button means so much. If you can take a couple of seconds to just write, hey, this is a hot post, that means so much. Like the more engagement I see, the more I know like I'm doing things that are right. Just talk to me. And I feel like I can speak for all creators that we really appreciate that. So
definitely. Awesome. Well, that has been the show, everyone. I would love to once again direct you all towards Sinn and all her stuff. We're gonna get her little a page up, I think, right? Or whatever is available. Or are you gonna plug your links? There we go.
There you go. Yeah, and so there's my link tree. I think I can say these things, but my Twitter is at SinSage, Sinn with 2 N's. Instagram is at RealSinSage. I have a Reddit sub r/SinSage. I am user u/RealSinSage on Reddit. Fucking A. Onlyfans.com/SinSage. You can find all my stuff.
Awesome. Definitely do that. Also, if you love this show and all the other productions of the ACA, you can go to tiny.cc/AEN podcasts, and that is your one-stop shop for all of the ACA productions. You can get it all in one place right there. Also, we're going to plug our Facebook Secular Sexuality fan group. That is a place where you can get in on all those juicy discussions that are happening. You'll see Tangel and Christy and all of the secular sexuality characters posting on there from time to time. Also, we have our ACD, the Atheist Community Discord. That's at tiny.cc/AC Discord. We normally have after show Discord parties, but I don't think that's happening today. So, but we go there all the time. So you get to have private little after show sessions with us from time to time if you like. We also have tiny.cc/merch ACA if you want to get any cool branded stuff. And then last, but certainly not least, I would love just to put up our crew cam. All the wonderful, amazing, beautiful people who make this show possible. We love you guys so much. We would be nothing without you. But with that, everybody, we're good here, right? We gotta put a cap on Christy.
No, we're done here. So I think everybody can take a moment to maybe take out their wallets, maybe do a little bit of Googling, maybe go past that first page of search results, find yourself a nice little indie performer, make sure to pay for what you're enjoying. And then if you like to, maybe give yourself a big ol' orgasm, or better yet, give somebody else one.
Watch the Atheist Experience live Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTAXP and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callaxp.